Following on from last week, I have a few small reinforcements to install with epoxy glue. In instances where it's unnecessary to use clamps or they would clutter the work, you can use a glue gun to hold components together while the resin sets. Hot glue has a short window where it's possible to get everything perfectly aligned. Then, once set, you can come back and clean up any excess. So with these frames, after I was gluing on the various little bits of wood here and there, I still had a bit of the glue powder left over. So I just mixed in a little bit of the dust that I saved out of my sander from hardwood sanding. What that did is it thickened everything up, made it around about peanut butter, and I've laid in some fillets here where these side members join the cross pieces. Those fillets will just strengthen it, but it'll also make a nice smooth transition when it comes to any painting. So just a little trick that I learnt a while ago is if you have some fillets and they're not absolutely perfect, or you want to avoid some sanding to make them smooth in the future, when they get to the stage where they're not soft anymore but they'll still take an imprint from a fingernail, you can come along with a little bit of spirits, a gloved hand, and just polish those fillets till they're nice and shiny. And even if you haven't done a really perfect job with your tongue depressor and got just a smooth fillet, if there's any little bits and pieces that you haven't got with your scraper, you can blend those in as well. So that's that all saves with sanding later on. Hot glue is very easy to remove, and then I like to trim the wooden additions to match the frame, as well as skim off any hardened epoxy squeeze out. With assembly complete, the initial epoxy coat and any holes filled get sanded, ready for another 2 coats to seal the frame. While the frames can still be laid flat, it pays to get them as finished as possible. With making the centreboard casing, I still have the templates that we made in some of the earlier episodes. They've got some of the drawings of other like timbers that I have to put in. So we're going to be using that. There's also another timber that goes through here, and it's not straight, it's curved. So it's a 40 millimeter piece, but it actually follows the curve of the hull. So we have to work that out. Gives me a good excuse to look at another aspect of using a router, this time handheld, which is why I just took it out of the table. Okay, hopefully you've been watching the previous videos. You'll know that I often use this template or pattern following bit. Bearing on the top, then the cutter blade, then the shank. Obviously the router grabs onto that. I often have this in the router table. I do have a separate one, this one that has the router, the shank, the bearing, and then the bit. So it's a little bit different where the bearing is placed. I like to use these ones for my freehand routing. And later on we'll have a look at this template guide or template bush, and I think these are absolutely great, and we'll have a look what goes on with them. There is a little complication. So we're going to use just the centreboard case as our template. We're going to get away with any measuring, any drawing, anything like that. I've already done that with the centreboard case. I want to just replicate that now in a nice bit of hardwood to make a hardwood log. So when we drop this into our boat, it's got a stop and it's got a nice bit of support there. So let's go and have a look at doing that. I've got a little bit of this nice hardwood, and I want to make that shape exactly replicate it. Rather than drawing it out and cutting it with a saw and then sanding, sneaking up to the line and seeing how I get it right, I can just use a router. So we'll just pop that there. Oh, in case you're wondering, if you've ever had a router and you've got like a flat surface there and you're like, why is that? Is that to follow straight lines? No, it's just so you can put your router down without it rocking. Now I find with routing that using clamps and things like that, they often get in the way. You have to stop the operation and move the clamp. There is another way. The glue gun works really, really well. There's no risk of damage to my actual bit of plywood here, which would be very bad if I stuffed that up, because of course the cutter is equal with the bearing. So you want the bearing to register this top part. If it goes too far down, it'll just exactly copy the bit of wood and you won't cut anything. Okay, that is perfectly replicated without any measuring, anything like that. Very, very quick way to do things. You can see here was not touched by the router. So this bit, relatively flat, didn't get any of that, but you can see where the freshly cut wood is. All right, we'll move on to doing the top of it now, and we have to use a different technique. So now this log for the centreboard is 40 millimeters. A couple of ways you could do it, I guess. I don't have a marker gauge. Could press my verniers into service though, set them at 40 mil, off you go. All it is now is to, better leave that on there. I just want to work out where we're going to put our template line. So let me just line everything up here. Yeah, that works. Line it down there, does it touch? Yeah, that's perfect. All right, now we need to know where we're going to put this because we don't want to flush cut that. The router will be quite big, it'll follow along and we'll lose quite a bit of it. We want to use our template following guide now. So we'll have a look at how we're going to do it. Okay, for the next step, let's talk about the template guide, template bush, pattern following bush, whatever you want to call it. Here it is. So this attaches to the router and this nice smooth metal follows the pattern, guides the router. The bit comes up through the middle, and that's the nice thing about it. You can adjust the height of that. It's independent of the pattern following guide, unlike the bearings in the other ones. So you can adjust the depth of your cut. I'm using this little cutter just because it's very, very small. It's only a 1/4 inch, a 6 mil bit. It's not going to remove much stock. You can use anything that fits through that hole, obviously. So if that bit's following and that bit's doing the cutting, you can see that there's a problem. It's a step. It's not an exact flush cut like these bits. There's no working out to do. What we need to do is work out that if this is following the pattern and this is making the cut where we want it, how far off do we need the template? It's not very hard to work out. So let's have a quick look with my verniers. Verniers are so cheap now and there's so many uses for them, like, just saw me using it as a marking gauge, and I'm always using this for marking pencil lines, as well as sometimes measuring things. So if we look at this, it's a spot on 6 mil bit. And if we look at the outside of that bush, it's exactly 18 millimeters. So we know that because the router is a vertical axis machine, half of 6 is 3. So from the center line of this bit is 3 millimeters to both directions. That's the radius of this bit. And the radius of that bit is 9 millimeters. So from here to the center is 9 mil plus 3 mil for the bit. So if we're following the pattern here, we know that 9 plus 3, 12 millimeters away from this pattern will be the line that we want to cut. There's no tricky maths there, so hopefully that makes sense to you. So there's the router, the bit's installed. We've got the guide bush there, and I said that it was 12 millimeters, so we can set our verniers there and go for it. Well, incidentally, you don't even have to work out the measurements really. If you don't want to, you can, if you do have a vernier, just adjust the bit so it's exactly horizontal, and then you can, of course, just take a measurement, lock it down, 12 mil, there we go, and like you can place this end of your vernier straight on the line where you want to cut, and you can bring your template down to it. So you can definitely use these as a no measure, well, no calculation template guide. I really, really like avoiding lots of measuring, lots of working out. It just gets rid of mistakes, but I don't want to harp on about it anymore. So I do every episode. I think everyone's got the message now. Yes, Troy, you can't measure things. Okay, that looks pretty spot on. Give them a tap. And just finally, the nice thing is that we can always, hard to show on camera because it's so low, we get down there and under and just make sure that that bit actually touches it, which is nice. Very good. I might just set that router up as a stop. Hello, dog. This is a glue gun. You don't want to come near this, mate. So there we have it. That's I'll just clean that up a little bit later. I probably could with a bit of sandpaper actually. It only left a really like a little wafer there. So that matches that exactly. It's 40 millimeters through there. And not only that, is to make the second one, all I have to do, of course, is just to move that 40 millimeters plus 12, so 52. Cut it again with exactly the same bit. The router's already set up, and bam. Both of those are made, ready to go straight onto this bit of plywood, and like beyond a little bit of measuring, not much of it was involved, but this is perfect. If I had traced this out on a bit of wood and cut it, you can bet that I would have had to have done a bit of finishing off. The first cut started out quite laboured, so for all subsequent cuts, I did multiple passes of gradually increasing depth. Large routers are quite capable of shearing cutting bits. Just on this template, where some of these bits of wood are located on the overall pattern, for the bunk and floor supports, I'm just going to drill a couple of holes in the corner so I can locate them accurately on my actual plywood. I just want to make sure that everything is exactly symmetrical on both sides, and just having a couple of drill holes in here will make it very easy to transfer those exact coordinates. All right, let's get into it. So when I was first making these templates up, there was just a couple of people who just thought it might have been a little bit of a waste of time, going a bit overboard. It did help me route these shapes out really, really exactly. And that means that all of these details now, I don't have to go back and measure them. I can, I can really easily just transfer them, and more importantly, I can transfer them exactly to both sides. I use the one template to route out both sides, so I know that they're exactly the same. So being able to have all the coordinates so easily transferred over is a very nice thing. So a little bit of work at the start in making these templates, but I've still got them. It saves me a little bit of work right now. Now the other nice thing, because I've actually used an awl to place these holes, I can feel exactly where they are with the point of my pencil, and that adds to another level of precision there. So I'm just marking these out again just to, so the bits of wood that are going to hold the bunk supports and things like that. Really, really easy to locate them. Okay, so we've got our bits and pieces. I've marked on there forward. That's towards the front of the boat. That works out well. A little bit of overlap over the front. That one aft, which one's a bit damaged. That's the end I don't really like. Have that. Again, they're just overlapping on the ends a little bit. That's okay because I want the router to get the angle right, so it's exactly flush. We can see here that nice bit of wood that I cut before will be just spot on. So I'll measure that up so it's consistent, but I just want to just see Is it exactly the same? Yes, it's exactly the same. So, these supports and case logs require screwing and gluing. The screw locations are easily worked out with the outlines drawn in, drilled and countersunk so the screws can be later covered over with thickened epoxy. Pre-screwing will make things easy later when it comes time to glue everything together, as the screws act as both locator pins and clamps at the same time. Overlapping wood can now be run through the router to get everything flush and the angles of the ends correct. Next, we have to fabricate a 70mm hardwood spacer to allow room for the centreboard, as shown in blue. None of my other tools are quite so well suited to cutting the angles as my general purpose Ryoba saw due to the size of the pieces. That's pretty close. How's that angle? That's good, that's good. Oh, that actually hits that line quite nicely. Oh, that's pretty good. That's better than what I thought actually. So I think I was going to just start touching this up with the sander, but I think what I'll do is cut all of these, make sure that they match up nicely. Any discrepancies I can help out with just a little bit of epoxy, but I want to get these, I want to glue these together so it is a fairly solid mass, screws, bolts, all the rest of it. When it is a finished product, then I might actually run a belt sander over and just take out any abnormalities, make sure everything's nice and rounded. So I'll just keep going now, hand cutting all of these pieces until they all fit together, and then we'll see where we stand from there. Worked out. A useful addition to the kit when using epoxy is baking paper, as it prevents the resin from sticking to any surface it's placed on. Some temporary screws act as clamps in an otherwise difficult position. So there we go, I made quite a bit of that glue mixture because it's very, very hard. So it was a good way of showing another use for baking paper because it's non-stick. It's essentially like a form on the other side of this. So we filled up this hole in the centreboard that we made very early in the piece. So we're making a nice hard plug later on that can be drilled and it can carry a sleeve. So this will be very strong. So I still do have a bit of glue powder left. What I'm going to do now is just thicken that with a little bit of sawdust to make it peanut butter consistency. Then there's a few like screw holes and things like that I've got to fix. So it really, having a bunch of things on the go at any one time, as long as you don't get confused by it all, it's good when you're mixing up epoxy because very little goes to waste, because there's always a screw hole or something like that that I need to fix. As I go through, I try not to just finish everything, mixing up epoxy as I go. Sometimes I can leave those jobs, so when I've just got this tiny small amount, I can mix a little bit of sawdust with it, make up a thickening mix, particularly good for screw holes and stuff like that. Because it's a glue powder, the only downside is it's a nightmare to sand, so I really do focus on getting things nicely finished. There's minimal sanding at the end of it. As far as the sawdust that I'm using, I just got some very, very fine stuff out of the belt sander bag. So the sawdust that comes out of a sander is particularly fine. And then I went through and sifted it as well. So make sure that it's actually finer than flour, this stuff, which is nice. Some people do use wood flour, which is a commercial product, but this is one way of hand making it. So there's two waste products really. So there was the epoxy that was going to go to waste because the job that I'd mixed it up for is completed. I don't want to waste epoxy. I got this given to me, but it's still too good a product to waste, and the more I waste, the sooner I would have to go and buy some anyway. And this stuff, rather than burning it or throwing it in the bin, is very, very fine powder coming out of the belt sander. Really, really great for this job. So I've got a little putty scraper, and it just does a really great job of filling those screw holes. When I'm filling these screw holes, I will leave it just a little bit proud of the screw hole, but I'll make sure that everything around it is scraped away. Sometimes if you try and make it level with the surface, it'll just be underneath, and then you'll have to go back and fill it again. So it always helps to just leave it a little bit proud on the hole itself. This thing's looking. Yeah, baking paper. Oh, well, that's perfect. That's really great. Fantastic. There won't be much finishing to do with that. And that's exactly the right shape, so we're very happy. Let's just go and have a look at how that baking paper form went on the centreboard. Probably have a harder time getting the masking tape off, actually. Okay, that will take minimal sanding, so that's really, really great. That is almost dead level. It's super smooth. It's as smooth as baking paper can be. So that's pretty good. There'll be very, very minimal finishing on that. Again, when I did this, I cut the hole into an hourglass. So that plug there will not be coming out. Super, super hard. We can drill that later on, and this will be our pivot point for the centreboard. I've fixed up a few imperfections here. They will need to be sanded down, so there's a little bit of work on that. This will be fiberglassed in a little bit, but there's a few other things that I have to do. One of them is to cut the rebate that we're going to drop a lead ingot in to add ballast and also to help keep this down. So that's absolutely perfect. With those where we just took off all the excess and just left a little bit proud on the hole, just hitting it with that has got it perfectly flush. I might just hit it just with a little bit of sandpaper. This is going to be fiberglass, so I want it nice and flat. I do have a few more screws to put in. According to the plans, they want screws every 100, not every, like 200. So I'll go through and I'll fix those, but everything that I had with that spare epoxy has covered that really, really nicely. And as long as you get rid of the excess, dealing with it is very quick. Okay, the final job I just want to cover in this one, because it's sort of the last of the routing that I'm going to be doing for a little while, is just make a recess that I can drop this heavy lead ingot that we poured in the first episode into this centreboard. Its job is to add ballast, okay, make the boat sort of harder to tip over, and also to keep this centreboard down. I think I'll be adding a downhaul to this anyway, but we won't worry about that. So really all I'm going to need is a router bit for later on, and a jigsaw, and probably a black marker pen. Okay, so I guess the first thing we'll do is just make up a routing template. Just use my verniers to get a nice straight line at 50 millimeters. So because I'm using the flush trimming bit, I'm not using the pattern following bit this time. I can make it exactly the size that I want. What did we say it was? 350. So it might look like the obvious thing to do now is just get my jigsaw and cut as close to that line as possible and call it a day. But as much as a jigsaw ever is at right angles to the base, this is a curved surface. So my cuts, and it's a bit of an exaggeration, on that way will be that, and this side will be a little bit like that. I'm just going to rough out most of the stock at the moment with a jigsaw, and then we'll use the router to get everything perpendicular to an imaginary right angle face here. The reason being is that the lead slug that we're putting in there does have 90-degree sides. So we want the actual hole to have 90-degree sides, not curved and chamfered. And we can see that just as we pull that out, you can't go that way, it has to come up because, of course, the sides are angled in. Okay, so I want to get this level now so I can find out and make my router template level. So I'll just chuck a little float level there, a little spirit level. Now I've got just a couple of windowsill levelers here, little plastic levelers. Well, that's all it took. I thought it was going to take a couple of them, but there we go. Okay, so we'll clamp that into position. If I can. There we are. That's really spot on. Okay, so now that I know that this is level on the table, I can go and put my template there and I'll know that it will be level. So now all I need to do is just make sure that this stays at that level. So I'll get a few more of those wedges and pop them in, and then we'll just secure it there. Okay, that's pretty good. And that's also pretty good. Okay, well there we go. We've established that that's nice and flat relative to that. Don't need to keep it here anymore. We can put it back over the edge so I don't cut into my workbench here. We'll reclamp it. We shall fetch our trusty router. So there we are, a nice neat hole, looks pretty much perfect. The only problem with cutting things with a router is, of course, that I've got rounded corners here because we're cutting with a circular bit. Let's have a bit of a look at our lead ingot. It might still fit, but there is another workaround if it doesn't. No, square corners will be a bit of a problem. Oh, it's rough on the fingers. Okay, that looks great. The hole is exactly the right size. They are perpendicular, which is fantastic. The lead weight fits in there just spot on. It is rough, all right? I did really hog that out. It's certainly not furniture grade, but I wanted to do it quick and dirty, get that done so I can move on to other things. This is going to be covered over, fed and fiberglassed. You'll never see it. You'll feel it, but you'll never see it again. There's some more things I need to do before I can put this center case together. I actually need to fabricate a bush to go through there out of stainless steel. I can't buy any thick wall stainless tube where I am, so that's I've got a bit of round bar that's getting drilled as we speak, and so we'll have to leave that for the time being, which is probably good because this video has probably already been her as it is. It feels like I've covered a lot in this one. Thank you everyone that shows up every week with your comments. The like to dislike ratio on our videos usually runs at about 99.6, 99.7. We actually got 100% like ratio the other day, so thank you very much for that. Most importantly, the people that do send us just a couple of dollars each video every week, that's what makes it possible. So thank you very much for that. It may not seem very much, but cumulatively, it does pay us to get this done. So we really do appreciate it. Okay, I'll see you next episode, and I can't promise what we'll come up with, but I'm sure there'll be fiberglass, resin, and probably a router or two.